Hello crafty friends, and a very warm welcome to you today. Today we're going to be looking at 10 ways to use fabric on your cards. So I have here a stack of fabric that I bought from the Rowan's Crafty charity shop. I think the whole thing cost me just £3, so it was an absolute bargain. But you use whatever fabric you have in your stash. For most of my techniques today, I'm going to be using my fabric stuck down to cardstock. I just find this a really helpful way of making my fabric more sturdy and easier to work with. So I just took a piece of regular cardstock, put some double-sided sticky down, and then added my fabric on top. Whether this helps you or not will very much depend on how thick your fabric is. If you've got thick, sturdy fabric, you might not need to do this. But if your fabric is thin and floppy, this may help. There are other things such as glue or iron-on adhesive that you can use with fabric. You use what you have in your stash in the way that helps you the most. Right, on to our first technique, and that is to create a fabric panel. So I took one of my pieces of fabric that I'd stuck down to card and I chopped it down with my guillotine. You do have to be quite decisive when you slice with the guillotine so that you don't stretch the fabric. But you could use a craft knife, you could use scissors, you could use a trimmer, whatever works for you. With this panel, I decided it would really pop if it had a black mat, so I added some black card behind my fabric panel. Do stick around to the end of the video because I will show you the finished cards that I made with today's techniques. On to technique 2 now, and that is to dry emboss some texture onto a fabric panel. Because the fabric is on card, you can run it through your die cutting machine with an embossing folder, and the texture will be embossed onto the card and onto the fabric. And I think this can be really subtle and really pretty. Technique number 3 is to take one of your fabric panels and use it to back an aperture. Before I used this panel to back an aperture, I spattered on some gold metallic paint and let it dry, and then I added a card panel from which I'd cut an aperture with an aperture die. How many times can I say the word aperture? I did put some foam tape between the 2 layers to give a little bit of dimension, and then I mounted it on a card blank, and here you can see the gold spots on the fabric through the aperture. Technique number 4 is to use a fabric panel as a mat. So this is a kind of reverse of technique number 1. Instead of using a fabric panel and giving it a mat, you use the fabric panel as a mat. So I just took some white hammered textured cardstock, popped it on one of my fabric panels, and then trimmed it down and popped it on a card front. And it's just a lovely bright pop of pink in this case that's got some interesting fabric texture. Don't forget, again, you can see the finished cards at the end of the video. Technique number 5 is to create a foundation for your focal spot. Here I took a square of fabric that I hadn't stuck down to card. I did put some double-sided sticky towards the middle of the square, then I stuck it down to a card, and then I used my tweezers to fray the edges, and that just gave it a lovely little bit of texture and interest. And this is a look unique to fabric. You can tear the edges of paper to get a torn edge look, but with fabric you can get a frayed edge look. Another way to use fabric to create a foundation for your focal spot is to die cut your fabric. Some fabrics will die cut beautifully as they are without any backing at all. I did find with these particular fabrics that although the die cut through the card, sometimes little bits of the fabric didn't get cut. I guess the die stretches the fabric a little bit rather than cuts it. But all I had to do was snip through those bits with a pair of scissors. And then I had a nice die cut which I could stick onto my card. On to technique number 6, and that's to create some bunting or flags. So I cut some of my fabric card combos into strips and then used my scissors to cut those into little triangles. And I chose 3 different colours. I've got a pink, a blue and a peachy orange. Next, I drew some strings on a card panel, and then I glued my little flags along the strings, alternating the colours. So you can use fabric for things that are meant to be fabric. So you could die cut bunting, you could die cut flags, you could die cut items of clothing. Anything that's normally fabric and you've got a die, you can die cut fabric to make that thing, if you see what I mean. Right, we're on to technique number 7 now, and that is to mix your fabric with paper and washi tape and anything else that you can think of, really. So I've got some strips of paper, some strips of washi tape, some strips of my fabric card combos, and I'm alternating them and sticking them down on a piece of card that I've covered with double-sided sticky. And then you can turn this into a card panel or a strip down a card. It might be a bit difficult to die cut through with all the card and the fabric, but you could always give it a go and see how it works. For technique number 8, I did some weaving. So I put some double-sided sticky along 2 edges of a piece of card, and then I stuck strips of fabric to the double-sided sticky. I stuck blue ones down the right-hand side like this, and then I stuck some pink ones on the perpendicular side, the bottom side that you're looking at right now. And then I secured those even more with another bit of double-sided tape, just so they didn't come off when I was weaving with them. And then I flipped over the paper, brought the fabric strips to the front and wove them into a square of woven fabric. Once I'd woven my square, I secured the ends down again with double-sided tape. And I'll show you the final card that I made with this little patch of weaving towards the end of the video. For technique number 9, I made some DIY fabric foam shapes. So I stuck my fabric down to some double-sided sticky adhesive foam. I then die cut it with a hexagonal die. I did again need to just release the die cut from the rest of the foam by snipping through the uncut fabric with some scissors. I then stuck that foam fabric shape down onto a card, and then I did a bit of quilting by making my own DIY fabric stickers. I put some double-sided adhesive straight onto the back of some fabric without any card, without any foam, and then I die cut more hexagons from that and then added those around my fabric foam shape. I'm not a quilter, I'm not a seamstress, so I'm sure there are plenty of you out there that would do a much better job of quilting your shapes than I did. I did leave a bit of a gap, but that was for aesthetic purposes. So that's all 10 techniques. I'm sure I can think of some more, so there may be a follow-up video coming soon. But here are the finished cards, the cards I made with today's techniques. So this is card number 1 featuring the fabric panel. All I did was add a double fishtail banner die cut out of white cardstock, added a gold piece of foliage and a halo sentiment on top of that. And I chose the black on white sentiment so that I brought some of the black from the outside to the inside. And this is card number 2, the one I made with the dry embossed panel. Again, I added a white die cut, this time in the form of a label. I did give it a black drop shadow just to tie it into the black mat of the larger panel, and then some gold foliage and a black halo sentiment again. I did add some little gold dots as well, just for a bit of energy and movement. For card number 3, I added a white die cut ticket shape and a gold butterfly with some gold dots. I did back the butterfly with some vellum to add a little bit of solidity, and again a hello sentiment and some gold dots. For card number 4, I added a strip of fabric as a foundation to my focal point. I frayed the edges of it, then I die cut a ticket shape out of the bluey fabric that I'd stuck to some card, added a gold fern and a congratulations and some gold dots. This is card number 5, the focal spot card. I added a double stitched out banner cut from the fabric and card combo, another gold piece of foliage, a happy birthday and some gold dots. And this is the other focal spot card. I just did exactly the same thing, but instead of using a gold piece of foliage, I used black just for a bit of impact, I think. And I used my black dot marker to add some black dots to spread the black around a little bit. For card number 6, my bunting card, I added a mat of black cardstock to my panel and a black hello, and this brought out the black lines and gave the whole thing lots of impact. Card number 7 was my mix and match card. I added 2 white circles to the top right hand, gave the whole panel a black mat, added a black sending hugs and a gold leaf. I think I might add some gold dots to this later because I think it needs something a little bit extra on the circle. And this is card number 8, the weaving card. I die cut a circle out of a panel of hammered textured white cardstock, gave it a circular frame and popped my weaving behind it. I then added another frame on the weaving just for a bit of interest, a gold piece of foliage, a sending hugs and some gold dots, and I think the bright colours in that weaving really add some nice punch to this card. And here's my last card, the one for Technique 9, DIY foam shapes, and Technique 10, quilting with DIY stickers. All I did was give it a black mat and add a hello. Again, I might add some bling to this with some gold dots, not sure. It's quite simple as it is, and I really like that. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's given you some ideas of things you can do with the fabric that you may already have in your stash. If it has, do let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll see you back here very soon for another video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.